Hello guys, Sodor Railway Studios here. Today I'm going to be talking about how I personally would fit Rebecca into my Thomas and Friends headcanon. So, for those who don't know, I'm actually one of the bigger Rebecca defenders, I guess you could say. Kind of like the Sudrian Zero, because I think she's actually the Sudrian Zero's third favorite character, I believe. And also, I wanted to talk about how I personally would fit Rebecca into my headcanon because I was watching Thomas Theorist's season 21 timeline video recently, and I thought, how could I fit Rebecca into my headcanon? Because I think it's pretty obvious. We all know that she was originally going to be introduced in season 21, which was meant to be the bit of foreshadowing at the end of A Shed for Redwood. That was meant for Rebecca and not Nia. And so, because at that point there was no big adventures plans, which I think we all would have been perfectly fine with. Like, I think if, and I do prefer it being that way. I think if the episodes played out that way, I don't think people would hate A Shed for Redwood quite as much. I mean, I don't hate A Shed for Redwood personally, but I do think that it could have been executed a little bit better. Like, one prime example being that, Philip probably shouldn't have been at Wellsworth to begin with, because he was never associated with Wellsworth. But we're not here to talk about Philip, we're here to talk about Rebecca. Um, so my theory about how Rebecca would be introduced, it would be a similar way to how she was actually, it would be a similar way to how she was introduced in the actual show. So the Fat Controller would purchase her to help Gordon with the Express and whatnot. And her introduction would basically play out the same. So it would basically be confusion without delay, but a few changes. For example, Edward and Henry would still be there. I'm not too sure about Edward because I don't mind the idea of him staying at Wellsworth because it would probably make sense because it's closer to his branch line. Um, but Henry would definitely stay at Tidmouth. So I think that he'd probably be the one to tell Rebecca. Sorry, he'd be the one to tell Rebecca um all about. So he'd be the one to tell Rebecca all about the other members of the Steam team and their attributes and some of their accomplishments. Because I wouldn't include Nia in my headcanon either, which is why that's one of the reasons why Nia's not appeared in any Sodoroa Tales episodes and probably won't she won't appear in any Sodoroa Tales episodes after that because Nia's not canon to my series because for one thing I'm not that big of a fan of her anyway, but also um I can't really see I couldn't but it's also because I couldn't think of a way to fit her into my headcanon. So basically, the Big Adventures movie never happened in my Thomas universe. So that also means that Ace isn't canon in my Thomas universe either. Thankfully. But anyway, let's get back to Rebecca. So basically, the plot of my idea of Rebecca's introduction, it would basically play out similar to how it does in the actual episode, Confusion Without Delay. Um, Maybe a few changes though. Like I mentioned before, Henry would be the one to tell Rebecca about the other Steam Team members instead of Nia. Um, but also another big change that I'd make, and the Sudrian Zero mentioned this as well. This is how he'd prefer it. I personally would have Spencer in the Flying Scotsman's role in the episode, because I will admit, even though it is nice that Flying Scotsman appeared in CGI, I will admit his portrayal was really questionable to me. Like his relationship with Gordon in the CGI series is literally just a copy and paste of Gordon and Spencer's rivalry, so I do think it would probably make much more sense if Spencer had Flying Scotsman's role in the episode. Because I know the Sudrine Zero did that in his series as well, which he did in his little arc that he did for Rebecca, um, where Rebecca actually stood up to Spencer instead of Scotsman, and I do think that makes much more sense. So that's the other big change I'd make for Confusion Without Delay. I'd have Spencer in Scotsman's role instead of Scotsman himself. And then also, most of her episodes would basically play out similar to how they did in the actual show. Like, I'd still keep some episodes in there, like what Rebecca does. For example, I don't know if I probably wouldn't include the fantasy sequence because I'm not a fan of the fantasy sequences for obvious reasons. But I would have like the actual plot of the episode relevant. So like I'd still have Rebecca wonder. I don't know because I want to say she kind of had an existential crisis in what Rebecca does, but I do feel like part of me feels like that might be a bit extreme. Um, uh, but yeah, what Rebecca does would play out basically the same as it did in the actual show. And then there'd also be episodes like Diesel Do Right, which is one of my favorites from the Big World Big Adventures era. And Gordon and Rebecca Coming Through, that's another episode I like, so I'd include that one. Um, I'm debating on whether or not I want to include the actual episode Chucklesome Trucks, or if I want it to play out similar to how the Sudrian Zero did it in his series, because he adapted Chucklesome Trucks in I think season 2 of his series. And I remember liking that version a lot more than the original episode. So yeah, I probably would have it play out similar to how the Sudrian Zero did it in his series. Um, and then also that I don't. And then also there'd be Stop Smiling Rebecca, which is an episode of my series. And fun fact, that was actually based on a Mr. Men story called Little Miss Sunshine Keeps Her Smile. Because let's face it, Rebecca is basically the Little Miss Sunshine of Thomas, pretty much. I mean, it's kind of in her personality, but anyway. So yeah, basically that episode would be play out, and then also an upcoming episode of my series Sodoroa Tales will be coming soon. That will be about Rebecca. And that episode is Triple Teething Troubles, which is an episode which will have her interacting with Derek. And yes, the title is a reference to Double Teething Troubles. But I probably won't have them have 3 mishaps, because that would just be reminiscent of the 3 strikes formula that we all know and loathe from every episode of the Miller era. But actually, I mean, I do think the 3 strike formula worked in some areas, like in some episodes. Like some of them they weren't quite as it wasn't quite as bad as in other episodes, but most of the time, yeah, it was quite boring and repetitive. So yeah, I probably wouldn't have a 3 strike formula in Triple Teething Troubles. So yeah, the title is probably going to be a bit misleading, but anyway. But yeah, I do hope you're all looking forward to that episode, because the Sudre Zero is actually the one that suggested that story idea, so shout out to him for that. Um, um, so yeah, that's basically how I'd include Rebecca in my Thomas headcanon. Um, I'm not really sure how to end this, but I hope you all understood this little reasoning for Rebecca being in my headcanon. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you all in the next one.